Here we are. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this morning's Jobtrain How Talent session. My name is Giles. I'm the Director of Strategic Development here at Jobtrain and your host for this morning's session, all about candidate experience. Before we get stuck in and do the housekeeping and all that good stuff, can I just ask, can everybody see and hear me and Amy and Adam and Diana okay? I think Matt's going to join us in a moment as well. I think he's coming. Here's Matt. Oh, nearly. There he is. Matt's here as well. I think Matt's joining us. Great. You can see and hear us all right. So hopefully Matt should appear in a minute. So yeah, really happy that so many of you could join us for this morning session. This is a session for you. And on that basis, it's interactive. You will see that there is a chat area. Feel free to chat amongst yourselves. Ask us any questions if you have them as well. You will also see that there's a few links as well on here. So for those of us that are joining us on Crowdcast, we are live on LinkedIn as well. You'll see some links too for the following sessions. So this is the first of 3 sessions around candidate experience. Today we're talking about establishing and maintaining trust with candidates. Our next session in July is talking about consistency of candidate experience right the way through the recruitment process, including into onboarding. And then the third one is a perennial subject that us as recruiters all like talking about, and that's hiring managers. So do feel free to join us for any one of those sessions, and ideally all of them if you can. That would be ace. We are also running a couple of polls as well. So if you're on Crowdcast, on the right-hand side of the screen, you'll see a little graph area. If you click on that, you'll see some polls. Do get involved. Do feel free to review those and click on those as well. And as we start getting some results in, us as a panel, we might dig into some of those as well. I'm hoping that, Matt, we might be able to see you in a minute because you're muted at the moment. With a bit of luck, hopefully you might appear soon. But let's get cracking in the meantime. I'm delighted to be joined by an amazing panel, all of whom have one thing in common, that they all are Jobtrain clients. So without any further ado, let's do some introductions, starting with you, Adam.
Hi all, my name's Adam O'Shea. I'm the Head of Talent Acquisition at Aspris Children's Services. Thanks so much for having us on, Charles.
Thanks, Adam. Amy.
Hi everyone, I'm Amy Thurtle. I head up the Culture and Inclusion team at YBS, but up until December I managed our resourcing and succession team as well.
Brill. Diana.
Hi, my name's Diana Reid. I work for St Helens Council, previously in people management, operations and recruitment. And like Amy, I've had a recent move in the last few months over to the Organisational Design and Development team. Really looking forward to the discussion. Thanks for having me on, Giles.
You're very welcome. We do have Matt with us as well from NHS Blood and Transplant. He's the strategic resourcing lead over at NHS Blood and Transplant. So hopefully he'll be able to join us in a short while. But while Matt is joining us, let's just crack on. We've got probably just shy of an hour. And just to sort of frame this session, ultimately, this whole candidate experience season that we're running came about because we joined the Talent Labs for one of their Collaborate days in London. And we spent the whole day with about 100 heads of resourcing, very busy, very chatty days, you might expect. And we focused in on candidate experience in the form of different roundtable discussions, what were the different pain points, and also trying to come up with some solutions as well. And conscious that we're all being asked to deliver more with less right now, the goal here was to come up with solutions that were as close to cost-free as possible. And ultimately today is going to be talking about trust. So candidates tend to drop out when they can't see or they don't understand what's happening next. So today's session is all about setting expectation with candidates, the importance of clear communication, speed, structure, consistency, all that good stuff. So without further ado, let's dive in. So let's have a chat about communication. And obviously, you're all Jobtrain users, so you have something in common. So the ATS is going to be supporting that. This isn't a Jobtrain and an ATS discussion at all. This is very much about candidate experience. But how do you all approach? What is your approach, your strategy around candidate communication? Who wants to go first? Just dive straight in.
I'm happy to go if you
go for it, Adam.
I think any conversation around candidate experience, and I'm sure the hiring managers at Aspris are probably sick of me saying it. I think we always start it with an understanding that what people are doing as part of their candidate experience, they're making life decisions. This isn't they're not applying for jobs on a whim. They're putting trust in you immediately by considering you as something that's really going to shape their life. We spend so much time at work, don't we, in our professional output, and I think having that consciousness when we're thinking about candidate experience, I think is absolutely essential. And I think you're right, Giles. I'm sure all of us on the call will say how happy we are in terms of what the system and what our ATS can provide us. But in truth, they need to go hand in hand. We need to have good systems with good, people communication as well. And I think we live in a world where communication is so rapid and so frequent, and people can be overwhelmed by that quite easily. So I think the clarity of your communication, and actually sometimes it being a person that wants to speak to you and make things really clear and concise around what your expectations are, I think that's the foundation of that trust in that candidate journey in truth. And that's something we always try and get right at the very beginning. And then hopefully then you're building on that, and people's experiences are exactly what you said they are at the beginning, and that's that whole trust part throughout their journey as well.
So can I step in there, Giles? Is that all right? So I would add to that, Adam. It's quite similar to my thought process. I think it's really important to recognise the effort and time that people put into job hunting, and to let them know that we recognise that it's tough out there. And I think it's really important that we take an external view. And what I mean by that is seeing outside of your own organisation, seeing it, putting yourself in the candidate's shoes and having some empathy with that. And then I think it's really important to reflect that in the process, whether that is making sure that applications are acknowledged, shortlisting in a timely way after deadlines, not leaving things too long after deadlines, having a measured approach to selection. So what I mean by that in terms of valuing people's time, you can look at any debates online about the kind of issues that people have or feel that they have in recruitment processes. People going through 3, 4, 5 stages. So it's about being measured in terms of approach and aligning that with the role. And respecting and valuing the effort and time that goes into that. And just if I may, just to sort of add on, I think for us at St Helens on our ATS journey, I think what was really important was, again, considering it from the candidate perspective and pinpointing in the process those touch points where we have black holes and closing those gaps, because that's where people drop off. So an example would be acknowledging applications, all applications, in an automated way, because previously that was done on an individual basis. So I second what Alex just said there about considering it from the candidate perspective, not just your own. I think that's key to driving your process.
Yeah, definitely. Amy?
Yeah, I agree with what Adam and Diana have said. I think for me, our key approach is transparency. And I think that covers lots of things. So everything from, wherever possible. And I can't say 100% of the time job adverts contain salary, because if I say that, someone will go onto our website and find me one that doesn't. But our standard approach is, job adverts that contain salary information. We've stopped closing our adverts early. We used to have this catch-all statement of, if we have too many applications, this may close early, but drives the wrong behaviour, drives poor diversity. So we stopped doing that. And I think we've really tried to give candidates information up front. So when we recently went through a remap of our process with Jobtrain, I say recent, it's probably about a year ago now, but one of the things we did with that was think about, from a candidate perspective, what can we give them up front that's going to help them understand what's going to happen in the process, what can they expect, and we share that with them from the beginning. We share more information about our process, about our behaviours, and make sure that even though a lot of the time we've got some really slick automation, we give candidates the opportunity to speak to a person, because sometimes you think you've set up a process really smoothly and someone can just take themselves through it. If they hit a roadblock or they need some help, how can they just reach out to a human and get that? So we really tried to make sure that transparent up front, always try and be clear and concise, but give them an out if they need some help.
That's really interesting, Amy, because it's one of the things that I wanted to sort of dig into around transparency. And I know we've got a couple of people here. Matt, welcome, by the way. So I'm glad you could join us and go through the IT challenges. But how many, it's a quick show of hands, and feel free to chip in on the chat here, but how many people are clear around salary and benefits within the job advert? All of you. That's so refreshing, because I don't really see it all that often. Yeah. And I've got a real issue with it. I get on my soapbox about it quite quickly.
It just wastes everybody's time though, doesn't it, Giles? And it's like, our job is absolutely, we talk in our team about we're the custodians of the candidate experience, but we're also the front-facing team to our business. And who wants to sit through an interview when you find out in the first 5 minutes that person isn't, at the right level? They want 20 grand more than you can afford to pay. That's just a waste of everybody's time.
It will also stop them from considering you in the future, right? That's the someone's experience. Again, like we said, they're investing all their time and they're hoping their effort into that process, and they could be an amazing candidate that really that conversation could have been had straight away or not been considered at all. So you're absolutely right.
And I think it goes back to being in touch with what's going on outside of your organisation as well, and not working in a silo. Because you go on it, you see any online social media discussion, and I think it's probably fair to say it's the number one issue with candidates around salary. But surprisingly, so many organisations still don't include it with the adverts. So having that awareness about what the experience is externally, what people are talking about, and what's important to them, I think is really, really important as part of your own outlook around the recruitment processes.
Yeah, Matt, any thoughts, anything to add? We're talking about sort of clear communication with candidates up front, and then making sure it's consistent all the way through the process.
Yeah, I noticed you were touching on salary, which is, I saw a stat the other day saying that 40% of candidates have disengaged with the process. Salary information hasn't been provided. I think where it's difficult is whether you can get across your full value proposition, because people will just look at the baseline number. Of course, if you're in the NHS, that's often some way off market, but there are other benefits such as effectively a final salary pension scheme, which are a little bit less immediate. So I think there's a sort of balance to be struck there, but there's no two ways about it. That debate is over. I think you are going to lose. You're going to lose good candidates if you don't include that. Yeah. But I think broadly, trust is built in the first moments of the process.
Sure.
That's something that I think I really believe in. Any sort of understanding of how people interact with information, particularly interact when they're looking at information on the internet. You've just got seconds, right? You've got seconds to get across them. People read the top 5 lines, 10 lines of your job posting, and then make a decision about whether to keep reading. They might give it 2 minutes overall. So you've really got to get that trust established as quickly as you can. Obviously, salary is a key part of that.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I know it's going to be it's a good challenge for you, I know, Matt, because a lot of the high volume roles that you're recruiting for donor carers for NHS Blood and Transplant. So it's a very specific role requiring very specific approach in terms of personality, but also there's some deal breakers as well, isn't there? So in terms of setting candidate expectations, I remember, a while back now for a donor carer, for example, one of the key things is you've got to be fairly comfortable with the sight of blood, but also be somebody that's caring and nurturing and wanting to help and support people. So you're trying to very upfront be clear about the type of person you're looking for, but also make them aware, almost like a bit of a self-selection exercise, why the role perhaps might even not be right for them.
Yeah, that's the thing, right? It's a classic sort of realistic job preview, but you somehow need to embed that, I think, in the job posting in a way that gets that across really quickly to people, and then enables them to make a decision about how much more time they're going to invest in looking into this and going into it a little bit more deep. So I think, yeah, the opening paragraphs of a job posting really, really important, because you've kind of got to get some of that key stuff across to them, because that's what their eyes will go straight to that. Their eyes will go straight to the salary, straight to the location. We all know what the key drivers are of candidate decision making. So I think it's sort of plugging in. I think this is kind of what you're saying, Giles, is you've got to kind of plug into their mindset and give them what they need, but balance that out with the things that you need them to quickly focus in on to make the right decision about whether to move forward.
Yeah. How many of you use video?
I'm sorry?
Job adverts. How many of you use video to support job adverts? Amazing. Yeah. Amazing. Because obviously, from the basis that a picture, tens of thousands of words, video is just like so much more engaging. But in terms of, making contact, make some human contact in a world where we're lacking in it, really, and introducing certain expectation, getting that person engaged and informed before they apply is such a great opportunity.
I think also. Sorry, Karen. Yeah, go on, Diana.
Okay, so I was also going to say as well, if it's okay, just expanding on a couple of points that Matt made and taking it in a slightly different direction on the around communication is is consistency, but also it might be the first time that somebody, for example, has contacted an organisation, and I think that's where the process is really, really important, because I think that it's imperative that we focus on all relationships regardless of the outcome.
Yeah.
So thinking long-term relationships rather than transactional appointments, because that's where it can break down quite a lot in terms of dropouts. And also I personally feel it's a mistake to only prioritise applicants in that process who we consider might move forward or be successful. So in terms of how we've done things, like how we've done some of that with the system, is again just acknowledging all applications, making sure that everyone gets a timely update regardless of whether they're moving forward at each stage or not. And it's really important that we use those communication tools to acknowledge that someone has reached out to us, like Matt said, but also signpost where we can, because if somebody is rejected, that doesn't have to be the end of the relationship. So if you're lucky, if you're able to have all of that information in one place, in, for example, an ACS platform like Jobtrain, you can use those communications and those tools to keep that relationship alive and for longer, and engage candidates in different ways. So I think that's really important as well, just expanding on a couple of those points around someone reaching out, because in my own organisation, for example, we're a council, and a lot of the people who reach out to us for roles could be service users, or they could be a young person who it's their first time contacting the council. They're considering a career in local government. So there's lots of reasons why we should be sort of relationship focused and having a process that underpins that. So I'm getting into branding. I'm getting into branding areas here. So I'll stop there, but just to make that point.
Go on, Adam, you jump in.
I was going to say some really interesting points. Anna, you're right in terms of the consistency of communication. I think what we find in our organisation, we've got a number of specialist education schools and residential children's homes across the UK. And a big part of that is obviously a hyper competitive markets in terms of trying to introduce people, not uncommon. So I'm guessing some of the vacancies that yourselves find yourselves with as well. And actually, again, you're going to have guessed that I'm really, really passionate about the people side as well as the system side. And I think that trust and element, if we're thinking about how responsive we are, I think to your point, Amy, around having someone there to guide someone through that journey, even if they're struggling with it and they've not quite got to the end yet. Actually, that's worth its weight in gold in terms of being the difference between one advert and another. I'm sure we'll find ourselves in with competitors whose pay rates will be similar, offerings will be similar. And I'm sure candidates at some stage have seen every advert under the sun. And I think the reality of sometimes our challenge is that people are applying for multiple jobs at the same time. So that the importance of that first communication or slickness of communication and information and support we're able to provide can quite literally be the difference between those two things, right? I'm sure we've all thought of the two comparisons of if you've applied for two jobs that are really similar and one of them picks up the phone and speaks to you and they're super engaging and can't be more helpful. I know which one I would rather go and interview for, and it's not a difficult decision for me. And I think as long as we have that in the back of our minds as well, is that they're things we can control. And I think that's such a blessing, right? There's a lot of things in the job market we can't control. There's a lot of things we can.
Totally.
So,
it makes me really sad that I still hear time and time again that, we've all acknowledged here that, as a person, applying for a job is a really, really big deal, up there with, buying a house or relationships and that kind of stuff. It's a huge life event and it's not something that people do every day. We're doing recruitment every single day, so it's become the norm for us. But I hear still so many people, including my stepdaughter, who was, fairly recent grad, was applying for roles. And I think she probably got just a simple acknowledgement for the role that she was applying for, maybe about 10% of the time, and that was it, and nothing else at all. So actually, I could get really cross about this, but it's just being human and considering people a little bit.
The reality is, Giles, there's no excuse for that these days because, I think we've probably all been around long enough that applying for jobs and responding to people used to be manual. That isn't the case for most people these days. There's, name me an ATS that doesn't enable an automatic acknowledgement of roles. I just don't think there's any excuse for stuff like that anymore. Candidates shouldn't feel like they're going into a black hole. And I think you're absolutely right. More people are likely to apply for jobs and then maybe for some people buying houses. If you look at the average age that people are buying houses these days, they've probably had multiple jobs in that time. And I think that there's a responsibility to treat those people like a human. And you have to sort of acknowledge that it's a lot of effort on everybody's part to get to the right solution. And during that time, there'll be, I think it was you, Diana, that said there'll be lots of people that fall out of that process and they should be treated with, the same time and effort that they've put into it. I'll bring up the dreaded word feedback because I know, I'm sure we all have managers that we struggle with that, but it's so important. If someone's giving their time to you, that you are giving them something helpful. And I spent a big chunk of my career doing grad recruitment, and this one person stands out really in my mind, and I gave her some pretty harsh feedback. For those of you who know me, I'm quite direct, but I, tone it down for the grads. And she said to me, you are the first person that I feel has actually told me the truth, and I can now go and use that and do better next time. And I think it's sad that I'm the first person who's told her the truth. She was a great candidate, but she was making some real own goals that she could then go and change. And I think I started out my life in agency recruitment. When I first came into my organisation, YBS, where I am now, you can really see the difference in direct candidates coming through and those that are coming through from agencies. And I'm sure, like all of my peers on this call, massive drive to get agency costs down. So we started providing some of that wraparound support for candidates of if they weren't coming through an agency, and they would normally have a prep call with their agent who would remind them about all of the right things to say. Our team started picking it up. We offered it. We didn't force it. We gave people the opportunity to have a call with one of the recruitment team, ask some of those questions, they'd give them some information, and we made it really easy to find out about us as an organisation. I don't buy into this rubbish of, oh, we'll just tell them to look at the website. Candidates are busy, they're probably applying for multiple jobs, and it's competitive. And if you want to stand out, you need to make it easy for them. So we started putting together these like candidate guidebooks, and it just puts everything in one place. Candidates can understand about who they're applying for and make a decision. And it won't work for everybody, but for those candidates that are in high demand, who are you going to go for? The person who gives you all the information up front, tells you the truth about the salary, and takes the time to have a conversation with you. You don't always have to pay the most to get the best candidates.
I love that. I was going to ask, actually, in terms of your approach to the process itself, do you communicate what the different steps of the recruitment process are, the timelines, anticipated timelines around that, and then what resources do you make available to people that apply so that they're informed and prepared, and essentially you set them up to perform in the best way possible if they're invited for interview? Interested in your sort of different approaches, Matt?
I think you're hitting on a really key point, Giles. Interestingly, the last time we did a major careers website review, the creative agency didn't put in a section on the application process. And I overrode, I'm really glad I did, because it gets really quite a lot of hits compared to some other parts of the website. And I think the reason is that candidates understand now that processes are going to be heavily automated. That's just part of the landscape. But they're also, trust is being by that. So transparency is really key. Transparency on your process. If you explain to them what you're doing and what they can expect, and what processes you use, for example, for assessment, that will go a long way to restoring trust. It's not something that you can easily do in a job posting, because you'll end up with a very long job posting. But I think there's a very strong case for finding ways in the process to inform candidates proactively about what they can expect and what they can't expect, and that will restore trust in the process.
Yeah, that's good. In terms of managing expectations, one of the things that we found really useful is our new career site that obviously links into the ATS. We've been able to use that as a platform to hold all careers information and recruitment information in one place. So one of the things that we've included on that site is essentially an FAQ page, but with bells and whistles, and it pretty much breaks down all the kind of questions. So again, it was built with the candidates in mind. So what would a candidate want to know? What would a candidate want to ask? And it covers all of those key areas. And it's not just managing expectations, it's also informative, it's helpful, and it gives guidance. And and we found that to be really useful from a signposting perspective, going back to some of the earlier points around branding and keeping the relationship going. We've got places that we can return people back to if they're not moving forward in a particular process, because a lot of our candidates who come through to the council go on to secure roles in other parts of the council or other services. So it's that feedback loop again. But I think, just going back to the point of just having that platform to hold that information in one place has been really valuable to us since we launched that around 15 months ago. But it's also a great place for us to signpost our hirers when they have questions, because that information's there for them as well.
Brilliant. Adam, I think you can jump in.
Yeah, I think one of our key point in our process where we've found it's super beneficial in terms of that clear communication and like I said, going back to transparency, has been around our onboarding processes. So I think particularly with candidates who might be new to our sector, particularly working with vulnerable children and young people, they may not be used to the kind of strenuous onboarding processes that they might when they come to join Aspris. So I think a big part of that for us has been, this is what we're doing and this is why we're doing it. And this, I think on the whole, that's the understanding of people is huge, because they're from a values perspective, they're aligning with the organisation, they're trying to care for young people or educate young people, so they understand the premise. But I think there's almost no such thing as over communication in terms of why we're doing that, and I think that helps build that trust and alignment with the organisation, even if it's something they're not necessarily used to. I think without that context, it's, oh, why are you looking at that? I don't know what. Even, I think our whole point is the process isn't designed to catch people out, is it? The process is designed to help people through it, and that's a big shift in terms of that.
It's a great comment. I think you're all actually involved. All of you are involved in regulated hiring. So that makes the onboarding process that much more complex and probably more difficult for a new hire to navigate and understand the context as to the why they've been asked for information, and the inevitable time delays around things like DBS. So a slightly different few areas, probably PEPs and sanctions and those kinds of checks.
Totally. And we started sharing ours earlier in the process, because what we found is that even though we were transparent about it, we probably weren't as loud. That over communication that Adam talked about, and people were getting all the way to the end of the process, they've accepted an offer, and then they're like, oh, well, actually, by the way, I've got a default. And for us, there's certain things, because we're in financial services, that make it really challenging for us. So we are crystal clear right from the beginning, and we say to people, it's not always black and white, but talk to us about it. So it's back to that point of building trust, is that you're not putting someone through a process to tell them something at the end when you could have told them at the beginning and they might have made a different decision.
And I, whilst we're on the topic of onboarding and going back to dropout rates here in St Helens, I like to call it the crickets period. So that bit between a verbal offer and commencement, where sometimes it can all go silent, and that's where we certainly were experiencing the big dropouts in that period. And I think that for me, I think that when we're looking at sort of like processes around recruitment and communication, I think there's three key aspects for me. I think there's the commitment from the applicants. And I think that applicants having visibility of their own progress in their accounts is really, really important. And that's a really great way to bridge some of that gap, which is now available to us since we've got the ATS. Compliance, which is what our HR teams do. So that's the pre-employment check-ins. And I think that's where it's really, really useful that we're using those communication tools in the system to be transparent, manage expectations that we're just talking about there, ask for what we need, but to give updates as well. But also connection. So I think what I mean connection is the hirer's role. So having great processes is one thing, and having the platform that enables us to do that is a huge stride forward. But we can't lose the human touch that supports that. So to add value and complement those processes, we need our line managers and our hirers to be doing regular check-ins to make sure everyone's got what they need and so on. But, going a step further than that, inviting people in, meet the team, all those different things. So I think for a successful onboarding experience, to bridge that gap between offer and commencement, there are different areas with different roles. I think certainly in our experience, I think sometimes, what used to happen is that once you've made an offer to somebody, the job of pre-employment checks then goes to someone else. And then you sort of have that period of no communication where everyone's in a black hole, and that's where the dropouts were really, really high. Were really high.
There's also two different things, isn't there, Diana, where you've got the functional good stuff that we absolutely need for someone to be compliant and join us, and then as we kind of circle back right to the beginning of the call again, it's about people. So there's such value in having a people interaction that could be nothing to do with how the compliance is going. It's more about, how you're feeling about, joining us, letting them know what their first day is likely to be like, who they're going to meet, those kind of things. The the small things that every candidate is sitting at home wondering what that's going to be like. So any information you can provide ahead of time on that is automatically building trust, because it takes the grey area out. And unfortunately, as many of us probably do, we think the worst. We think, oh no, no one's gonna like me, or I'm not gonna get on very well, or whatever it might be. People, they torture themselves in those.
Really anxious. Sorry, Adam. It's a really anxious period for a lot of people. Between, but I'll stop talking after this point. But as a very where the applicant tracking system we found is amazing for facilitating those type of conversations and knowing when you need to reach out to someone, is having that date stamped information in front of you. And being able to identify where something's not happening. So, for example, if you send out somebody an offer of employment and it's been a week and they haven't logged, you can see that they haven't logged in, or you can see that they haven't signed it. That's a red flag for me. That's where you pick up the phone or you reach out to them and you say, we've noticed that you've not done this. Is everything okay? Have you got any questions? Do you want to speak to your new line manager? So you can use the process and the system to facilitate. And I think that's where we found it really, really useful in that way. Yeah.
Amazing. Sorry, is that you, Amy?
Yeah, I just wanted to build on something Adam said. I think the key thing for me around the onboarding element is don't make assumptions. I think when we did some testing around our new onboarding processes and guides, we put things, because people worry about who's going to meet me on my first day, where can I get a cup of coffee? What do I do about lunch? What do I wear? That really worries people. And when we did some testing around, dress for your day, smart casual, people unhelpful. Tell me, what do you mean by dress for your day? What do you mean by smart casual? And we started putting some what this is and what this isn't. And I think that's the thing is, advice I'd give to anyone listening to this call is, you're in this every day as recruiters or as HR professionals. So take yourself back a step. Remember your very first day and think about some of the questions you wanted to ask and make the answers really obvious. There was joke, don't they? How do you explain it to someone who's a Martian or whatever? But I really think we need to remember that we're experts in this, or I'd like to think we are. So therefore, our level of knowledge is kind of assumed, and you need to almost put yourself in that person's shoes and think about, right, when we say smart casual, or when we say, I don't know, whatever acronyms we use as organisations, for which there are loads, how do we help our new colleagues or our candidates decode some of that stuff so they don't feel as anxious coming into our organisations?
I've got a couple of questions sort of within this room, as Jobtrain users. Are you all using the Welcome Hub element of Jobtrain? Just to explain what there's for people here. So we have onboarding within our platform, pretty much like a lot of ATSs do. We try and keep it as transparent as possible so a new hire can see what the recruitment team are working on, but also what they need to work on as well. But we have an area that's designed to help to keep people informed and engaged. It's not to get it's not in place of human contact. I'm a huge fan of hiring managers actually just keeping that communication going, but it's there to answer all the questions ahead of the first day. You can have video there, video introduction and what have you, but it's all designed to fill that, what we've all termed, and I quite often call the black hole of onboarding, that potential silence that can happen, especially when it's a compliance heavy process between offer and confirmed or even the start date, which is the thing. And I guess my second question for you, this is just out of pure interest. Do you use other forms of communication, for example, like WhatsApp? So we're looking at bringing WhatsApp into the Jobtrain platform probably later on this year, beginning of next year, to try and take the recruitment process directly to the candidate. There's a lot of obviously asking the candidate, and you're always going to need to bring the candidate back to the ATS, but it's a more direct way and perhaps a more personal way, perhaps sharing video content or messages and keeping that engagement going. Again, not to get in the way of a telephone call, traditional one, but some people prefer that method of communication. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I just stop in there. Yeah, I mean, we've, prior to getting the applicant tracking system, we had very limited tools in terms of communication, and it's not the same as WhatsApp, but we actually find text messaging incredibly useful in certain circumstances when we need to prompt or get hold of someone quickly or get something back quickly during pre-employment checks. So thinking along those lines, and I think the more platforms that we have to share content or keep the relationship going, I think is would be a good thing.
Yeah, I also think to add on to that, it's how people are used to communicating, right? So, and actually, if they've got a question about their new role, if they want to speak to their hiring manager or they want to speak to their recruiter, whoever it is that's going to provide them with that information, it doesn't need to be, I need to have a secret phone call outside of work because I'm speaking to my new employer or whatever it might be. It could be as easy as sending a quick message and getting the information you need, Giles. So yeah, we certainly utilise it with those aspects so people know how they can keep in touch and it not seem as formal. I think because again, we're thinking about the anxiety of people moving jobs. Sometimes the informal bit is actually quite a nice, comforting thing to get that information as well, coupled with all the good stuff that we can already provide them. So yeah, I'm sure
it fills that gap and prevents people, because people can continue to get offers for other roles, right? Even after maybe accept an offer with you, and think about the investment of time, money, energy, and bringing that person through the process, and obviously finding something you really want to hire, to lose them just through lack of total engagement and communication, which is be a real shame.
Which, going back to what Amy was saying about not making assumptions, we know, and you don't think for 1 second that because you've offered somebody a job and you can now step away and that's it and they're going to start with you. There's some really in-demand areas where just because somebody's in an onboarding process doesn't mean that they're not getting other job offers, they're not getting other approaches, they're not getting counter offers from where they are. That's all happening, and that's where the having that connection with the people that you're going to be working with and the organisation that you move to is so important. Because people are in demand right up to the day that they start and beyond.
And also, do you find that candidates, I'm sure we've all been candidates at some stage, right? It's the best thing about talking about these kind of things. We all have direct experience of what something good or something not as good looks like. And we're obviously really good at segmenting the process and understanding that people are here or people are there as part of that. But in reality, a candidate doesn't recognise people don't recognise they're in, or now I'm in onboarding, or now I'm in shortlisting. They're in their process, right? They're in their experience. So you're absolutely right, Dan. I think there's no assumptions. To Amy's point, is you can't assume that someone's feeling about like anything. I think the continuity of that's super important.
We've got a question.
Yeah.
For all of you, I might start with you, Matt. So this is a question from Claire. Thanks, Claire. Do you proactively seek feedback on your candidate's experience? And if so, do you get more negative feedback about the recruitment process or onboarding? So is one better or worse than the other?
That's a timely question because we're looking at it now. We have looked at successful candidate experience, which is relatively easy to get because obviously you've got a new joiner. It's relatively easy to contact with them. We are in the process of rolling out feedback surveys to unsuccessful candidates, which is obviously a lot more complex. We haven't touched on fairness yet today, but fairness and inclusivity is a big driver for that. So we've got some challenges around how can we look at protected characteristics, because the survey will be outside of Jobtrain. So there are some sort of challenges around that. But I think unsuccessful surveys are obviously critical because they're the ones that are going to be your detractors.
Yes.
If you have a job. So they're not going to be backward in coming forward. And I'm sure my peers here who probably do that can probably tell a better story. But we need to have the full feedback, warts and all. And that's part of the whole piece here, which most important, which is making feel seen at each point in the process. So for me, that's absolutely critical. Something we do, something we're going to be doing a lot more of.
Yeah, we take feedback from successful and unsuccessful candidates and also hiring managers as well. And I think it's really important that you then do something with that information. So the team will look at kind of common trends and things that come through, and that's driven, I suppose a lot of the changes that we've then gone on to make, that's why we share more information up front now. We make sure that we don't close roles too early. All of the little things that I think over the last couple of years have added up to a better candidate experience. Many of those have come because of feedback that we've had from people. And I think it was you, Diana, that made the point earlier. Just because a candidate is unsuccessful in this particular process, often you'll get them come back through the process more than once. And so I think it's really important that if they're taking the time to give you feedback, they're clearly engaged with you as an organisation. They're definitely people that you want to hear from, because if they don't care about your business and they're unlikely to join you, they might just have a little bit of a rant or not give you any feedback at all. But you do
human nature to more readily complain about something than to praise something, I think.
Yeah, but I think just being asked the question, and it's also nice as well. What we try and do is when we get positive feedback, is share that with the line manager. Share that with, we've had, this person didn't get the role, but they shared this feedback. Thanks for the time and effort that you put into it, because they do put a lot of time and effort. Not all of them, but most of them.
Yeah.
Adam, do people more readily provide negative feedback around the recruiting process or the onboarding process? That's the second part of Claire's question.
Yeah, I think the onboarding process is probably more of a natural target for negative feedback based on the time frame, I think is our reality. So I think where people's perception of how long things should or don't take, and so I think that's a big part of what drove us, Giles, in truth, to kind of being really specific around this is what we do and this is how long it could take. Because I think it's just that mindset of, and the expectation set in as part of the trust within the process, right? In terms of, okay, if I know this is already going to happen and this bit might take a little while, it could be a DBS, it could be that I've got a wealth of experience in the sector, so there's a lot of references that will need to be chased. I think from a recruitment point of view, the recruitment part of the process, I think it's interesting, isn't it? Because it will tend to be that a lot of people will come forward with feedback who have been successful. So you're right, Matt, your point was excellent in terms of if you focus on all that, you think everything's rosy, right? Because a lot of this stuff is they're on a high of getting a new job and they think this is amazing. And there'll be some aspects of improvement that are absolutely key. But we're certainly putting onus on that opportunity for quick feedback, convenient feedback for people, because you don't want people to feel like they're jumping through hoops to give you feedback either. And they are, whether we like it or not, we can't be close enough to it to spot every single person's journey and person's perception of their journey. So without the feedback, you're blind in that, aren't you? In terms of you're making changes, you can't make informed decisions if you've not got the feedback from the people themselves. But yeah, Giles, to circle back around, I think onboarding is an easier target, I think, in our sector. I'm sure the guys are saying from a regulated sector perspective, just purely on time frames, I think is where it owns itself up to being more of a challenge, which is exactly why we're trying to be a bit more proactive with the information provided on the front end.
Do any of you, it's pretty easy to use the phrase mystery shopper, but do any of you have people that actually just go through that process, either completely independent or as part of your team, to experience that process firsthand in terms of, the communication's clear, how's the application experience, is the process communications consistent when I get through to interview, when I'm dealing with perhaps an interviewing or hiring manager, and then through to onboarding? Do you test that?
Yes, we're actually, apologies everyone, me jumping in again, but we're actually running a piece of work with an EDI specialist at the moment, Giles, and specifically looking at the candidate journey. So doing a series of different journeys, successful and unsuccessful, different parts, dropouts at different points, because we know how valuable the communication points are, and how rapidly things change in terms of people's expectations and how they want to consume information. So we're undergoing that piece of work at the moment, which I already know is going to provide huge value to us. Again, what we've used an independent provider for that, so that again we're completely not involved with. But we know that we know that this says this. Well, actually, we want it to be like you said, Matt, warts and all. Here's where we could be better with that, or here's where candidates' experience could be enhanced. So it definitely be something we'll keep doing.
Just to come in on that, that we did that about a year ago. So you made a good call there, Adam. I think you will find it useful. We really did. Interestingly, it told us a lot of things we already knew or had intuited. But what it critically does is give you evidence. So, you're then able to go out and make a business case, to those holding the purse strings to say, look, we need a bit of investment to address this, and this in our process. So definitely a valuable mystery shopper, a valuable tool.
Yeah, the other thing that you can do really easily today, especially with generative AI, is use what is sometimes called social listening. So that is regularly going out and looking at or gathering the feedback and the data in terms of what people are saying about you and your organisation on, for example, platforms like Glassdoor, for example, which is a classic one. Reddit is also a really good source of information for that as well. You'd be amazed at the number of conversations that go on about organisations, experiences and things. We sometimes call it the dark socials, but AI tools are actually, it's just a simple, prompt within, Claude or ChatGPT will actually bring back quite a lot of really information, helpful data around what people are saying and validated data as well, which can help, give you something to work on as well.
Just to take that a slight change of, but something we haven't touched on, just to touch on briefly, if that's okay, because obviously the thing that we're talking about, one of the things we're talking about here is about communication and building trust with candidates and hirers and line managers. Is AI in the recruitment process? Now that's obviously an evolving topic and a bit of a hot topic, and we've been doing some work to support our hirers with that. And the reason that I mention it specifically around trust is that what it sometimes creates is a lack of trust. So if somebody submits something, a written application, that can then be scrutinised by a hirer. Is that true? Is that not true? Is that AI generated? And I think those kind of things are feeding into relationships and trust and connection and so on at the moment. And as I said, it's something that we're doing work around at the moment in St Helens, with it being an evolving situation. But it's also an opportunity to develop relationships and develop trust. So rather than scrutinising applications, for example, it gives us an opportunity to remove some of the overemphasis on written documentation and instead strengthen that selection process. So there you have that opportunity to have more emphasis on interaction beyond that written submission, more in-depth interviews, increasing engagement and developing that relationship. So it's all going back to all of these things that we've touched on today, making sure the human touch is there, having a good process, relationship building. But I just wanted to touch on that briefly because it hasn't come up yet, and it is, I think it is, certainly in my experience, can have quite a dramatic impact on that trust in a relationship if hirers don't know what to do with it when it happens. I think that's really, really important. And one of the other solutions that you can have in terms of strengthening that selection process is recruiting in different ways. So, for example, we've done campaigns using the event manager feature where we've reduced application to expression of interest and invited people in instead for open days, for events to start. And everyone, I think, mentioned this, start that engagement very early. So using tools to mix up the process as well. So just touching on that, because I think that's really impactful at the moment and it's still evolving.
I'm very glad you mentioned it, because you'd be amazed. There's almost this, it's becoming almost universal now for candidates that they perceive that when they submit an application online, it's going to be processed using AI, which just isn't the case at all. And I think it's a really strong opportunity for employers to be very transparent about the process they go through to assess candidates and give candidates a sense of, actually give them a bit of peace of mind, actually, that there are humans behind the scenes and they're not just going to a black hole. It's not all being processed by AI. And I think leading with that transparency, or even where AI is used positively, is a good thing too. It is a really, really good thing, Diana. So I'm glad you raised that one. Definitely.
It's spot on, Giles. And one thing that a little tip that folks might find fun, you mentioned Reddit. There's a Reddit thread called Recruiting Hell, which you might have come across. I think this is something Hung Lee put in his newsletter a couple of weeks ago. Really interesting, worth having a look, because someone's done a meta-analysis of like 20,000 recruitment complaints that were posted in this Reddit thread, and it's not entirely what you would expect. But one of the things that stood out is a lot of complaints about one particular ATS. I won't mention which one, not Jobtrain, and references to the Mobley case. Well, that outs the ATS vendor right away. Which is one of the AI cases going through the courts in the US. And that sort of perception that AI is ageist, for example, what that test case is about, is clearly quite widespread. So I think dealing with that assumption that we're all sort of out there making decisions with AI, when the realities are that most organisations are not doing that. In respect of assessment, at least, is a really important takeaway.
Yeah, I mean, we're turning it on its head a little bit within Jobtrain, as much as we've got a real concern about black box AI being used to score applications. There's just so many concerns around it. What we will be doing is actually flipping that on its head a little bit. So we're using generative AI to automatically build out consistent scored assessment forms. With multiple choice answers or scores or weightings behind them. So each and every candidate completes the same assessment. It's consistent. You can control exactly what that's based on, whether it's values, behaviours, competencies, and what have you. It actually takes the person's spec and automatically creates a scored assessment form. But you don't have AI scoring. It's absolutely consistent. It's explainable, and you can provide feedback to candidates using it. But I think candidates do have this perception that AI is just being used everywhere. We need to break through that and break it down.
Yeah, I think that's a really good call actually about making. But I think if anyone from the hirer side is struggling with what to do about the applicants using it, because we know that. I think I've seen some stats. It's over 3/4 of people are using AI in applications and CVs and so on and so forth. If anyone's kind of struggling with the things around that, we're starting to approach it in a way that seems to be working around. I suppose embracing. That's quite a strong word, but it's here to stay. It's involved and it's not go. So not fighting it. People are using it in the applications, but using that as an opportunity to go a bit old school and strengthen the conversation and the interviews and the selection. Rather than spending time scrutinising it or policing it. So I suppose in a roundabout way, what I'm saying is having a bit of a level of acceptance that it's here. And it's here to stay. And it's about how we adapt our processes rather than competing with it, challenging it, losing trust. So for anyone who's because I know some of our hirers were struggling with that. So it's, this approach seems to be working for anyone who's struggling. And we put that, again, going back to everything in one place, that's on our career site. It says that we accept that people will use AI, however, we appoint based on experience, capable. We want to find out about you, so being transparent, so feeding into that transparency again, and managing expectations. So all of those things that we've been talking about throughout this. Thanks,
Diana. And we're getting to the top of the hour now. Any really quick final thoughts before we wrap up? I'm looking at you, Adam, Amy, and Matt specifically.
Well, yeah, I think it's just a really interesting topic, which I think we can't understate the importance of the investment and thought that goes into organisations' approach to the trust and the candidate experience. Yeah. And I think people who aren't focusing their time on the candidate experience are going to be a detriment to the other people that are. And I think it's how regularly can we be having these conversations with wider stakeholders in the organisation, and I guess it's about then developing clear metrics of measurement in terms of the candidate experience where we can. So going back to the feedback and go back to all of those elements of understanding the experience, because we know about it, we're passionate about it, and it's how you convey that to the wider organisation to get that wider investment, which I think is a really interesting topic, Giles. And I think going back to the only point I'd kind of die on the hill with is that a lot of this is in our control, and we can control these touch points and trust elements and building that. And I think what an amazing, powerful thing to be able to do instead of feeling helpless. If any of us here and anyone that's been on the call, you can make changes really quickly in terms of making that experience better for people.
I think sorry, Matt, you go.
I was saying very, very briefly. I mean, we've been talking about this in the industry for 20 years or more, right? So it's a perennial conversation. But I think if just this idea for me of making the candidate feel seen, if we put that at the heart of our thinking, we are dealing with human beings here. So walk a mile in their shoes and build your processes around to make individuals feel seen. There are lots of mechanics in doing that. But if your test is that, then you're going to go a long way to making those candidates promoters of your recruitment process and not detractors.
Perfect. Amy?
And I think for me, just reiterate my point really, transparency is key. Share as much information up front as you can and throughout the process, and support the candidates and the hiring managers, because ultimately we need to set both of those up to succeed, because whether the outcome is an offer or not, if you do those things, everyone has a good experience, and then that's ultimately improving your brand perception in the market, which in these tough times we all need a strong brand.
Amazing. Thank you to you all so much for all of your input, all of your insights, and couldn't agree more. And thank you to you all for joining us for this morning's session. I hope very much we'll see you on the next two, one in July, one in September. We'll do a blog post on the back of this anyway, just to condense down a lot of this conversation. So it's almost like the TLDR, if you like, just to make it easy for everybody. We do offer candidate experience audits as well. So if you're interested in one of those, there's a link in the chat there, probably for non-Jobtrain users, but equally for you. We're happy to help our customers as well. Hope you have a really good rest of the week. Enjoy the sun. Hope you don't get too hot, and look forward to seeing you all very soon. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Bye.
Cheers all.